Hello, my name is Philip and today we will be talking about fundamental analysis. Fundamental analysis is a method to try to find the intrinsic value of assets by evaluating economic, financial and other factors that may affect the values of assets in the present or in the future. The studies range from macroeconomic factors such as the performance of the economy in general and the conditions of each industry to microeconomic factors such as financial conditions. The general objective of the fundamental analysis is to produce a quantitative value so that investors can compare prices historically and thus make decisions. When traders are analysing the short term, it can be concluded why an economy is behaving in a certain way, since variables that are constantly changing are analysed. Even fiscal and monetary policies are based more on the short term because they have to correct the failures that exist in economic cycles to make sure the crises do not be so deep and that the booms do not turn out to be negative. In some cases, this has caused euphoria in the stock market. In an economy, there are different agents such as companies, consumers, or the state, and each of them makes their own decisions in different ways. Therefore, if somebody wants to understand how the demand for goods behaves, it is necessary to decompose the aggregate production, that is, the gross domestic product or GDP, from the point of view of the different goods produced and the different buyers. When GDP is decomposed, several important components can be seen. By analysing these variables, people can see when there are recessions in the economy or when there are booms. For example, in the 2008 crisis, it is normal to observe a drop in consumption, investment, and also the volume of international trade. It is normal to analyse the crisis not only by observing the GDP, but also the economists analyse the salaries, the unemployment rate, and the development of industries, amongst other things. In the economy, there are several types of instruments such as bonds, shares, and bank deposits. Also, people could decide to have all their wealth in cash, which would be more comfortable since they would not have to make transactions nor go to the bank. But that also means they will not receive any interest. So the decision to have cash does not depend on the yields of the various instruments. The determinants of the demand for money will be our number of transactions and the interest rate. The interest rate serves to intervene in the economy by the central bank affecting consumer decisions. The central bank intervention rate also affects the money supply of commercial banks. In some cases it will be better for financial intermediaries to lend money, at other times it will be better to have their reserves in the central bank. This decision will depend on the corresponding analysis of the profits. Fiscal policy is controlled by the government of each country and is usually advised to be counter-cyclical. That is, if the economy is in crisis, the government should spend more or reduce taxes to reactivate production. Or conversely, if the economy is in a bullish phase, the government should decrease its spending or raise taxes. It is true that governments and central banks have medium and long-term projections and objectives, but every quarter they are evaluating the behavior of the economy and its variables such as industrial production, consumption, real estate, and amongst others. With this analysis that is done several times a year, the bank and the government make their respective decisions to direct the future of the economy. Long term is what really matters for economists. It is not enough to grow in a decade if an economy does not have adequate policies to perpetuate that growth. So, the models in general in macroeconomics are about the long term. The economy fluctuates permanently along a trend and it is normal to present a crisis in certain periods of time. But to ensure production growth constantly over time, government policies must focus on variables such as savings rate, capital accumulation, human capital development, and amongst other things, that offer the ability to maintain stable growth. In the long term of the economy, the interannual fluctuations of the economic activity predominate. When recession happens, it causes consumers to be pessimistic, and when the economy is expanding, consumers are optimistic, and the behaviors demonstrate this. But if people look to the past in long periods of time, the panorama changes. Fluctuations are not important, but the long-term growth is. The reason why growth is important is because this determines the standard of living and also determines whether it has improved in this time. Because of this, what matters to macroeconomics is not only an aggregate production, but production per person, as this approximates each person's standard of living. Economists do not ignore the fact of inequality, but studies and models try to approach reality. So it is necessary to have these variables that, even though they are not entirely true, they do approximate to the reality. To analyze growth in countries, economists have used long-term models initiated by Robert Solow at the beginning of 1950. The models consider aggregate production and try to have variables that affect production, such as capital and workers in an economy. The way in which these two factors are related to the models is affected by technology, as an economy with a higher technology will be more efficient with the factors it has, and thus will reach greater aggregate production. With long-term macroeconomic models, it is concluded that increases in worker output are due to increases in capital per worker, technological improvements, or more skilled workers. The education is a very interesting explanation because it explains the great growth after the Second World War, as technological innovations made production more efficient in all countries, and the knowledge of the people also had an expansion during this period. What determines long-term production is the relationship between production and capital, as the amount of capital determines production. The economy has changed drastically in recent decades due to greater dependence on international trade. With greater volumes of exports and imports, globalization has become an important factor for the world economy, as well as influencing other aspects such as politics or culture. Globalization has formally been defined as the phenomenon of acceleration and intensification of economic interaction between people around the world. Companies and governments of these countries are involved in this effect, although today there is no country that has not been influenced by globalization. This importance in globalization has currently made it necessary to create new macroeconomic models that have to be developed to explain the behavior of the economies, and also to take into account what measurements the government of each country has taken to face this process. For many people, the values of their culture are very important to them, and they do not want to exchange them for more global values. This is why some people are still reluctant to a total globalization of all aspects. There is a great debate that persists over time about when and how much politicians should intervene in this process of globalization, and when to preserve their own identity, or how much their economy should be protected from foreign goods. In the economic sphere, one way to trade like other countries are agreements to reduce taxes on imports, or even eliminate these tariffs completely, so that free competition is what determines which products consumers will choose. Free trade agreements consist of a regional or bilateral trade agreements to expand the market of goods and services among participating countries. The agreements consist of the elimination or substantial reduction of tariffs for goods and services between the parties, so that they compete under market conditions without any other friction. These agreements are governed by the World Trade Organization or by agreement between countries. The globalization of the production and distribution of goods and services has been well received by some people who can now access foreign goods of better quality and in some cases at better prices than local production. But the opponents of globalization show their concern about the local producers of each country and their standards of living after the expansion of international trade. In addition to increasing trade and allowing access to new products, globalization allows the exchange of cultural features, customs, and other determinants in daily life, such as music and literature. The models and economic currents of recent years have exposed the benefits of international trade, showing how these types of agreements improve the general welfare due to the more variety of products, more accessible prices, and better conditions for the movement of people. But it is normal for this type of economic change to bring out agents or people who feel that they may lose with the implementation of these policies. Local producers often feel that they are not as competitive to foreign producers, so they can go bankrupt or reduce their profit margins. In addition, many times, companies take advantage of this free circulation of capital to establish their businesses in countries where costs are lower, such as labour, which in many poor countries is much cheaper than the industrialized countries. It is important to study the most important variables of the economy to invest in any type of asset. Since understanding how the fundamental analysis works, people can better understand the reports issued by the central banks, as well as the high-impact news such as inflation data, creation of jobs, industrial production, real estate, etc. With a good economic analysis, you can project how the economic behavior will be in the following years, and with that, make medium and long-term investment decisions, or even know how to react to the news. A trader who has a good command of fundamental analysis and technical analysis will be a more complete trader and with better tools when making decisions in the market, whatever asset he is focused on. We hope you enjoyed our course. Thank you for your interest, and we'll see you next time at Forex Academy.